Melissa Campbell signed the last contract while gazing at the New York skyline through the large office window. At 35, she had become the lead financial advisor at Future Investment, steadily building her career through talent and hard work. Ms. Campbell, here are the materials for tomorrow's meeting with the Burton family. As she took the documents from her assistant, Melissa checked the time. It was already past 7 p.m. Her husband David had sent a message saying, "I'll be late again today," but she didn't mind. Although both worked in finance, David's income was about half of his wife's. Working as an investment advisor at Citibank International, he didn't have the same client list or track record as Melissa. "Thank you. Let's call it a day." When Melissa said this, her assistant's face showed relief. Her subordinates respected her work ethic but sometimes felt overwhelmed by her perfectionism. After leaving the office and returning to her luxury apartment, Melissa sank deep into the living room sofa. Her eyes fell on the family photos adorning the wall. In the center were her parents, George and Martha, who had just retired last year after working as teachers for over 40 years. Next to them stood her sister Laura, holding her 6-year-old daughter Emma. And then Melissa and David. "The perfect family portrait," she murmured. On the surface, they were a harmonious, happy family. Her parents were respected as educators in the community, Melissa was successful in finance, and Laura was. Thinking about Laura always gave Melissa mixed feelings. Since dropping out of college, her sister had never held a stable job, preferred a flashy lifestyle, and was constantly struggling financially. When she gave birth to Emma 6 years ago and became a single mother without revealing the father's name, their parents were quite bewildered. However, Melissa didn't hesitate to support her sister and niece. She established a trust fund to cover Emma's education from kindergarten through college and quietly covered Laura's rent whenever she couldn't make the payments. David sometimes questioned this generosity, but Melissa dismissed his concerns with their family. The ringtone of her smartphone interrupted her thoughts. Laura's name appeared on the screen. "Hey, Mel, do you have time tomorrow?" Laura's voice was cheerful as usual. "I have a meeting with Future until 3 p.m. I'm free after that." "Perfect. I have something to talk about." In the middle of their conversation, Emma's voice came from the background. "Mom, aren't you done yet? The movie's starting." "Sorry, Emma's in a hurry. I'll tell you more tomorrow. Love you." Before the call ended, Melissa thought she heard a man's laughter in the background. Perhaps a new boyfriend. Laura's romantic relationships were always fickle. Melissa sighed as she headed to the kitchen. Opening the refrigerator, she noticed a sticky note from David. "Business trip extended. Back Monday. Love you. D." Again. She murmured. David's business trips had increased lately. He explained them as career advancement opportunities, but Melissa doubted he could capitalize on these opportunities. However, she refrained from voicing these thoughts to avoid hurting his pride. While heating a frozen meal in the microwave, Melissa thought about Emma. The bright, intelligent girl was Melissa's secret joy. For Melissa, who had chosen not to have children, Emma was like a daughter. As she was having dinner alone, she received a video call from her parents. On the screen, her smiling parents appeared from their living room in their new home in a Florida retirement community. "You look well." "Yes, we're having a wonderful time," Martha replied. "George finally broke 80 on the golf course." "Don't brag about me," George joked. "Mel, how's work?" "It's going well. I'm alone this weekend since David's business trip got extended." Her parents seemed to exchange glances for a moment. "You should take a break too, Mel. Always working is." Martha began. "I'm in the middle of a big project right now." Besides, I enjoy my work. The conversation shifted to lighter topics like the weather and neighborhood gossip, ending after about 30 minutes. After hanging up, Melissa took a glass of wine and stepped onto the balcony. The New York night skyline stretched before her. Career, husband, family, the perfect life, she told herself. Yet deep down, she felt something was missing. She wondered what Laura wanted to talk about tomorrow. Her sister was always unpredictable. Melissa finished her last sip of wine and returned to the living room to prepare for tomorrow. Future Investment is launching a new $5 billion fund in the Asian market. I've recommended you as the fund manager. Melissa was momentarily speechless at the CEO's words. This was the biggest opportunity of her career. As she left the meeting room, she was so excited she took out her smartphone to message David, but thought better of it and put the phone back in her pocket. She wanted to tell him this news in person. Besides, Laura was supposed to visit today. When she returned to her office, her assistant announced, "Your sister is here." Melissa frowned. She was 2 hours early. "Sorry, am I too early?" In the reception room, which resembled a living room, Laura sat wearing a vibrant red dress. Next to her, Emma quietly read a picture book in her school uniform. "I just finished my meeting. Actually, I have wonderful news." "Me too." Laura excitedly interrupted. "An amazing opportunity has come my way." Melissa sat down, setting aside her own news. Laura's opportunities often ended in failure, but she didn't want to dampen her sister's enthusiasm. "So? What kind of opportunity?" Laura leaned forward. "A fashion magazine photo shoot. A special feature for Glamour Today. A famous photographer will be shooting it. A 1-week photo tour in Bali." Melissa pretended to be impressed. "That's wonderful. But..." She glanced at Emma. Laura understood her sister's concern and smiled. "That's right, so I have a favor to ask," she continued while gently stroking Emma's head. "Can you babysit for just 1 week?" Melissa couldn't help but frown. "Laura, I'm very busy this week. A new project is starting. Please, Mel." Laura pleaded, almost putting her hands together. "This is truly an important opportunity for my career. I have no one else to ask." "Mom is working hard," Emma suddenly spoke up. Her small voice had a touch of loneliness. "I like staying with Auntie." Melissa was moved by Emma's earnest expression. True, this week was packed with important meetings and presentations. But remote work was possible, and she could ask her assistant to adjust her schedule. Above all, for Emma. "All right," Melissa answered with a sigh. "But next time, please let me know earlier." "When do you leave?" "Tonight," Laura said, looking a bit apologetic. "My flight departs at 10 p.m. "Tonight?" Melissa couldn't hide her surprise. "What about the luggage? Emma's school?" "Everything's prepared," Laura pointed to a large sports bag. "I've already contacted the school, and all of Emma's homework and textbooks are in there. All that's left is for me to get on the plane." Melissa felt a momentary unease about how she had already arranged everything. But before she could voice any more questions, Emma took her hand. The child's innocent smile dissolved Melissa's concerns. "Let's have a fun week together." Laura quickly stood up, kissed Emma. "Mommy will be back soon. Be a good girl and listen to your aunt." "Good luck with your work, Mom," Emma hugged her mother tightly. Laura turned to Melissa, expressed her gratitude, and hurriedly left the office. "Emma, how about pancakes for breakfast?" Melissa called out the next morning as she measured flour in the kitchen. It had been a late night, but after watching movies with her niece and tucking her into the guest bedroom, she had completed some work remotely. Emma was quietly drawing something at the dining table. "Auntie," she called in a small voice. There was something heavy in her tone, different from yesterday. "What is it?" Melissa stopped what she was doing and turned toward Emma. Emma continued speaking without looking up, still staring at the picture she was drawing with colored pencils. "Mom lied." Melissa frowned and sat next to Emma. "What do you mean?" Emma looked up at Melissa with tearful eyes. "Mom went with Grandpa and Grandma, and your papa." Melissa's mind couldn't immediately grasp what the words meant. "My papa, you mean David?" Emma nodded slightly. "I heard Mom talking on the phone. She said, it's like a family trip with David, my parents, and us." Just without Melissa. Something froze inside Melissa. "Emma, is that true? When did you hear this?" "The night before last. Mom was talking on the phone, and I was pretending to sleep in bed." Emma's voice trembled. "I was scared because Mom was lying." Melissa stood up and leaned against the wall. Her mind was in confusion. David was supposed to be on a business trip. Her parents were supposed to be in Florida. Laura was supposed to be going to a fashion shoot. "I'm sorry I lied to you, Auntie," Emma's voice quavered. "Mom said, Emma, keep quiet about this." Melissa's thoughts were interrupted by the sound of her phone ringing. It was an unknown number. "Hello, this is Campbell." "Is this Melissa Campbell?" "This is New York Central Hospital." Though the voice was quiet, it thundered in Melissa's ears. "Your sister Laura Taylor, your parents George and Martha Taylor, and your husband David Campbell have been in a car accident. They are all currently unconscious and have been taken to the intensive care unit." Melissa's hand trembled, almost dropping the phone. Emma was looking up at her with a worried expression. "An accident? When, where?" "Around 11 p.m. last night, a car went off a cliff on a mountain road. A local resident discovered them and called an ambulance. They are all in critical condition." After hanging up, Melissa stood dazed for a while. She came back to her senses when she felt Emma's hand holding hers. "Auntie, what happened?" Melissa embraced Emma's small shoulders and explained as calmly as possible. "Mom, Grandpa, Grandma, and Uncle David have been in an accident. They're in the hospital now." Fear spread across Emma's eyes. "Is Mom going to die?" "No, she'll be fine," Melissa answered, reassuring herself as well. "I'm going to the hospital now. Do you want to come with me? Or should my friend Sarah look after you?" "I'll come with you," Emma showed strong determination. Melissa quickly called her assistant, explained the emergency, and requested schedule adjustments. Then she called a taxi and headed to New York Central Hospital. In the taxi, Melissa's mind was in turmoil. Why were they all in the same car? Why had they lied to her? Why was only Emma excluded from this family trip? And why was she herself excluded? Emma's small hand held hers. That warmth foreboded the coldness of the reality she was about to face. At the hospital, she received detailed explanations from the doctor. All four had suffered multiple fractures and internal injuries. David's condition was particularly serious, requiring emergency surgery for head trauma. "These are your family's belongings," a nurse handed over 4 plastic bags. The police recovered them from the accident scene. Melissa mechanically took the bags. David's suitcase, wallet, and his smartphone. The screen was cracked, but it powered on. When she entered the passcode, the first thing displayed was a message exchange with a shocked Taylor. "My God." Melissa's hand trembled. There were details of secret meetings between David and Laura. Hotel reservations, intimate photos of the two of them, and a message from Laura saying, "Looking forward to the trip. Parents are excited too. Keep it a secret from Melissa." Melissa's vision blurred. Sitting in the hospital corridor, she continued scrolling through David's smartphone with shaking hands. There was a family she didn't know. In the cold hospital waiting room, Melissa had no more tears left. Amid the conflicting emotions of shock and anger, she focused only on confirming the facts. Emma was spending time in the pediatric playroom at a nurse's suggestion. For Melissa, this was a relief. She didn't want to break down emotionally in front of her niece. She picked up David's smartphone again. Recovering from the initial shock, she began a more detailed investigation. The photo folder contained organized albums labeled work, family, personal, and others. Tapping on personal, she found dozens of intimate photos of David with Laura, beach dates, hotel rooms, restaurant dinners. Checking the dates, the oldest photo was from 6 years ago. 6 years. Melissa murmured. Right around when Emma was born. An ominous feeling constricted her chest. Next, she checked his emails. Among the work emails, she discovered a folder called Private. Inside were several emails with the subject Education Fund, sent from her own email address. What is this? When she opened them, she found details of transactions she didn't recognize. Significant amounts were being transferred monthly from an account in her name to another account. The recipient was named Emma Campbell Education Trust. Emma Campbell. Her mind was confused. Emma's surname should be Taylor. She investigated the emails further. The attachments included account statements, copies of contracts, and a PDF of DNA test results. Probability of paternity, 99.9998%. Melissa nearly slipped from her chair. Emma was David's child. Evidence of an affair that had continued for 6 years. Furthermore, she discovered that large sums from her own income had been diverted. The education fund she thought she had established for her niece was actually for David and Laura's secret child. Ms. Campbell. Brought back to reality by the nurse's voice, Melissa hastily slipped the smartphone into her pocket. These are your father and mother's belongings, the nurse handed over 2 bags. They haven't regained consciousness yet, but their condition is stable. Thank you, Melissa responded mechanically. My sister and husband? Your sister is still in the intensive care unit, in surgery. Your husband is. The nurse hesitated momentarily, as if choosing her words. Still in critical condition. Melissa nodded expressionlessly. Her emotions were numb. After the nurse left, she began examining her parents' belongings. From her father's bag came travel documents, cash, and a small notebook. Opening the notebook, she found various notes in her father's meticulous handwriting. Flipping to recent pages, a memorandum caught her eye alongside travel plans. D&L relationship continuing. Is he really Dee's child? Martha insists Dee should pay child support. Be careful not to hurt M. Melissa's hand trembled. Her parents knew. They knew about David and Laura's affair and that Emma's father was David, yet they had kept silent. From her mother's bag came a notepad and family photographs. The notepad contained doctor's appointments and plans with friends, nothing particularly noteworthy. However, there was something written on the back of a photo. Our family's secret. October 2018. Turning the photo over, she saw David, Laura, newborn Emma, and her parents. It looked like a hospital maternity ward. Melissa was not in the photo. Family secret. She laughed bitterly. Just then, the nurse hurriedly returned. Ms. Campbell, your husband has regained consciousness. Would you like to see him? Melissa took a deep breath. David lay in bed, surrounded by tubes and wires, half his face covered with bandages. When Melissa entered, one of his eyes slowly opened. Melissa looked down at him expressionlessly. So you're awake. David tried to say something but couldn't produce a sound. Instead, he slightly moved his hand, seeking hers. Melissa stepped back. I'd like an explanation, she said calmly. Why did you lie about a business trip and go on vacation with my sister and parents? Fear flashed in David's eyes. The accident, everyone is safe? They're all alive. You're in the worst condition, Melissa answered matter-of-factly. Answer my question. He closed his eyes and exhaled painfully. I'm sorry, should have told you. For 6 years? Melissa took out the phone from her pocket. I've seen your phone. The photos, the emails, everything. She held up the phone within his line of sight. Emma is your child. The blood drained from David's face. Mel, forgive me. I can explain. Can you explain diverting funds from my income? Her voice finally began to show emotion. The fund I thought I established for my niece was actually for your secret child. At that time, Laura was in trouble. In trouble? Melissa's voice rose. She used that, and so did you. Even my parents. You all deceived me. A nurse peeked into the room and cautioned, please keep it down. Melissa regained control and lowered her voice. Why? She posed the simplest question. After hesitating, David answered. At first, it was just a mistake. The night of the Christmas party, you were away on business. He stopped his excuse-like words and continued. But when we found out Laura was pregnant, I panicked. Your parents said it would be a family disgrace, but I didn't want an abortion. And when Emma was born. So you all decided to keep lying. I didn't want to hurt you. But you were happy to use my money? Melissa's voice was cruel. David couldn't answer. And this trip? Laura suggested it, he answered weakly. She wanted to spend time together as a real family. Family? Melissa smiled sarcastically. A family without me. She stood up and approached the bed. I'm filing for divorce. I've already contacted a lawyer. Mel, please. David begged. I love you, this was a mistake. A mistake for 6 years, she responded coldly. When my parents wake up, tell them I know everything. We'll have a family meeting once everyone is discharged. As she headed for the door, she turned back and said, oh, one more thing. When you started with Laura, I was on a business trip to the Chicago branch for a new project, remember? That trip was when I secured my first big contract. You congratulated me the same day you slept with my sister. Guilt appeared on David's face. Get well soon, Melissa said sarcastically, leaving the room. 3 days later, her parents also regained consciousness. Melissa visited them but didn't discuss the truth. She simply said, we'll talk when everyone has recovered. The fear that flashed across her parents' faces confirmed they knew the truth. Laura's recovery was the quickest. Sitting up in bed with one arm in a cast, she stared at Melissa. Emma. That was her first word. She's at my home. My friend Sarah is looking after her, Melissa answered calmly. She's fine. Don't worry. You know? Laura's voice trembled. Melissa silently nodded. I won't make excuses, Laura said with surprising strength. I love David. Ever since Emma was born. And you kept using my money? That was. Laura faltered. At first, I really needed it. A single mother, no job, but then. It became a habit? Melissa said coldly. You took my husband, used my money, and excluded me from the family. I was jealous. Laura suddenly cried out. You were always perfect. Grades, work, money, everything. I was always in the shadow. But David chose me. He loves me. Melissa was momentarily shaken by her sister's words but quickly regained control of her emotions. I see. If you want to see Emma, come to my house after you're discharged. We'll talk, all of us. Laura nodded tearfully. We just wanted to be a real family. How ironic, Melissa said as she stood up. You wanted to be a real family without me. As Melissa stepped into the hallway, she almost felt overwhelmed by a wave of emotions for the first time. But she quickly pulled herself together. There was so much to do. The first step was meeting with her lawyer. Her smartphone rang. It was the CEO of Future Investment. Ms. Campbell, how are you? How is your family's condition? They're recovering, she answered flatly. I'm glad to hear that. Regarding the Asian market project, what are your thoughts? After a moment's hesitation, Melissa made her decision. I accept. But I have one condition. What is it? I want to be based at the Tokyo office, not Hong Kong. On the other end of the phone, the CEO was silent in surprise, then answered, I'll consider it. Melissa hung up and left the hospital. A plan was forming in her mind. There was nothing holding her back anymore. 2 weeks after the accident, a heavy silence hung in the living room of Melissa's apartment. Her parents, seated on the sofa, looked aged, while Laura nervously intertwined her fingers. David occasionally adjusted the bandage remaining on his head, staring at the floor. On the table lay neatly arranged stacks of documents. In the corner of the room, a female lawyer operated a tablet. Emma was spending time at her friend Sarah's house. Melissa didn't want her present for this. I'm glad you've all recovered, Melissa began in a calm voice. These past 2 weeks have given me ample time to think. Mel, let me say first. Her father George began. No, Dad, Melissa quietly cut him off. Let me speak first. She picked up one of the documents from the table. These are email records recovered from David's phone. They contain evidence of his relationship with Laura for the past 6 years, and proof that Emma is David's child. She picked up the next document. These are records of unauthorized transfers from my account to the Emma Campbell Education Trust. David, you used a friend in the IT department to gain illegal access to my online banking. David tried to make excuses, but Melissa continued. And this is from Dad's notebook. Evidence that my parents knew too. Her parents gripped each other's hands tightly. I only want to know one thing. Melissa sat down deeply in her chair and looked each of the 4 in the eyes in turn. Why did you exclude me? After a silence, her mother Martha answered in a trembling voice. We didn't want to hurt you. Didn't want to hurt me? Anger mixed into Melissa's voice for the first time. After lying for 6 years? At first, it was a mistake, George said. When we learned that David and Laura had a relationship, we were furious. But when Laura became pregnant, we couldn't force an abortion. Because it would be a family disgrace? Melissa said sarcastically. Yes, Martha admitted frankly. We were respected as teachers in the community. For one daughter to have a child with the other's husband, we couldn't bear such a scandal. So you kept me in the dark? We wanted to protect your career too, George said in an excuse-like voice. Back then, you had just been promoted. If you were concerned about my career, why use my money? Melissa regained her composure and asked. Here David spoke for the first time. That was my responsibility. Laura was struggling financially. Emma was innocent. I was a coward, Laura suddenly interrupted. He didn't want to acknowledge being Emma's father. So I took advantage of Melissa's generosity. My sister was always perfect, successful. I was just a failure. Her voice was bitter. You were jealous of me? Melissa looked at her sister with disbelief. You had everything. Laura's voice rose. Grades, job, husband, but he came to me. He chose me. But not his wallet, Melissa's voice was ice cold. Silence fell over the room again. That's enough, Melissa finally stood up. I'll tell you my decision. She signaled to the lawyer, who distributed documents to the four. This is the divorce agreement, David, Melissa explained matter-of-factly. It outlines the conditions for alimony and asset division. Sign it, and we can avoid court. David's hands trembled as he looked through the document. This is too harsh. Adultery, embezzlement, fraud, if it goes to court, it will be even harsher. Mom, Dad, Melissa turned to her parents. This is a consent to relinquish inheritance rights. I am no longer your daughter. Her parents stared at the documents with aghast expressions. And Laura, Melissa finally looked at her sister. This is the arrangement regarding Emma. I am stopping all financial support. You and David take responsibility for raising her. Laura paled. But I don't have a stable income. That's your problem, Melissa responded coldly. Please reconsider, Martha pleaded. We're family. Family? Melissa smiled sarcastically. The four of you can continue living in the family you created. I'm no longer involved. Emma is innocent, George said. Yes, Melissa's tone softened slightly. That's why I've established a separate trust fund for her. Neither I nor any of you can touch it until she turns 18. It's education money that only she can use. Mel, please, David tried to stand. Can't we start over? It's too late, Melissa said resolutely. I'm transferring to Tokyo next week. I'm starting a new life. The Asian Market Project. David murmured. Yes, the position I dreamed of. Nothing is holding me back now. You're doing all this for money? Laura said provocatively. Melissa smiled quietly. For money? No. For freedom. She placed 4 pens on the table. Sign. In silence, each of the 4 took a pen and signed the documents one by one. When the last pen was put down, Melissa signaled to the lawyer. It's over, she looked around the room. Please leave my home. As the 4 headed for the door with heavy steps, Melissa stood by the window, gazing at the Tokyo skyline. A strange sense of liberation spread through her heart. Ms. Campbell, the video conference with New York headquarters is ready. At her assistant's voice, she turned from the window where she had been gazing at the sea. 3 years had passed. A high-rise office with a panoramic view of the Manhattan skyline had become her new place. Thank you, Jessica. I'll start in 5 minutes. After her assistant left, Melissa turned back to the window, admiring the glimmer of the Hudson River. As vice president for the Asia-Pacific region at Future Investment, her career was flourishing. And so was her private life. On her desk sat a photo of her with Michael. They had announced their engagement just 6 months ago. He was a gentle, sincere man, and Melissa was truly content in their relationship. Her smartphone lit up. It was an email from New York. She hesitated to open it but eventually tapped. To Melissa. Please respond. We're at our limit. Laura has lost her job and my health has deteriorated. We need help, for Emma's sake too. As family, please. From David. Melissa smiled coldly. This was the development she had predicted after leaving New York. The news of David and Laura's affair, and the fact that Emma was actually their secret child, had gradually spread throughout the community. David had lost credibility in the financial world, and Laura led an even more unstable life. She had heard that her parents were also isolated, their reputation as educators damaged. She replied concisely, "You are strangers to me. When Emma turns 18, the trust fund for her will become available. Until then, solve your own problems yourselves." After pressing send, she felt a slight guilt. Thinking about Emma still pained her heart. However, she believed the child should live with her biological parents. A knock at the door, and Michael peeked in. "Before the meeting, do you have a moment?" "Of course." He entered and stood beside Melissa. "Something troubling you?" "Just ghosts from the past." She turned her phone face down. "A contact from New York?" Michael had guessed. She had told him the whole story. "They still haven't given up." Michael placed a hand on her shoulder. "You made the right choice. Distancing yourself from those who betrayed you is self-preservation. But sometimes I worry about Emma. When she turns 18, she can make her own decisions. Then you can reach out to her." Melissa nodded. Michael's words always brought comfort. "By the way," he changed the subject, smiling. "I'm looking forward to our weekend trip." "Me too," she smiled genuinely. After Michael left, Melissa gazed at the sea again. Far from New York, she had begun a new life. The pain in her chest was gradually easing with the passage of time. "Real family is something you choose," she murmured. And once more, she looked at the photo with Michael. Leaving the past behind, she was determined to keep moving forward.